because Blackness is so full. It's so encapsulating. It's, how we walk through the world, but also when we talk about medicine, obviously in the middle of a global pandemic, when we talk about policing in this nation, when we talk about gender, sexuality, so many of these other like identity markers, like Blackness changes how we have to engage in space. So I love being Black. It is really just like such a blessing that I'm going to look like I'm 28 for the next 50 years.
My name is Liz, and you're live in the Black Seat, where Black people are sharing our experiences and our true selves in a space that is diverse, free, and unfiltered. Everyone is welcome in the Black Seat, but make no mistake, Black folks are driving. If you're ready to challenge your ideas about Black people or learn something new, we're here for the genuine seekers. So if you're ready, buckle up, let's go. All right, so I've known Troy since high school, going on 30 years. He has a podcast called
Stakes is High, the Black Nerd Podcast.
Podcast with a Z, right?
No, podcast.
Oh, but you spelled it with a Z.
I spelled it. It was a mistake. It was fine.
Okay, I thought that was an extra Black thing you were doing.
No,
so.
No. The Black Nerd Podcast is Black as we. That's pretty Black, yeah.
The Black Nerd Podcast. Yes, so say hello to the people. Tell them a little bit about yourself, your age, where you're from, where you live, however much you feel like giving, your profession, and how you identify ethnically.
All right. I'm going to do just like I do the intro. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Troy Hunter, a.k.a. Tall Black Guy on the Twitters, on the social medias, all that. I am live and direct from Southside Chicago, born and raised Compton, California. I am currently not practicing code switching. So my current profession, I am employed at the University of Chicago. I do IT work. I am a artistically minded person where I have interest in the visual and the audio arts. I majored in radio, television, film at Northwestern University. Could not get a job in my major, so I got on this computer thing. And guess what? Computers always break, therefore I'm always going to have a job. I am 42 years old, and as the kids would say, I am Black AF. So that's me.
Yes, I love it. Thank you, friend. My second guest is Jessica. She and I have been friends for about 6 years now. And Sis is doing her thing as a producer at The Root. And earlier this year, before everything really went haywire, she won a Webby Award. Hey. And I was excited, poking my chest out like I won it. So, Jess, same thing. Name, age, where you from, what you do, how you identify ethnically, all that good stuff.
Okay. Hey, Liz. Hey, Troy. My name is Jessica Mouli. I'm 28 years old. I'm from Miami, Florida. I racially, obviously, identify as Black AF, as my peers say. Ethnically, my family's from Haiti. I'm first generation American. I'm one of 4 girls. I'm a video producer at The Root. I really love telling stories about, Blackness as it intersects with so many parts of our life. So something that I hear all the time is like, people are like, oh, well, is there anything that you like to report on besides Blackness? And I think that is such a limited perspective because Blackness is so full. It's so encapsulating. It's, how we walk through the world, but also when we talk about medicine, obviously in the middle of a global pandemic, when we talk about policing in this nation, when we talk about gender, sexuality, so many of these other like identity markers, like Blackness changes how we have to engage in space. So I love being Black. It is really just like such a blessing that I'm going to look like I'm 28 for the next 50 years.
Yes. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I feel like I read somewhere that Toni Morrison said that people were getting on her about always writing about Black people. Can't you write about something else? And it's like, there's so much, why would I want to write about anything else? It's it's just so full. So it's interesting that somebody has come to you. Like, is there anything else to talk about? No, there's not, because you don't know enough about us.
Correct. And it's like whenever I'll see headlines and it's like first Black anything, I'm like, in the year of our Lord 2020, someone is the first Black anything. Like, that's ridiculous. And that is the reason why we have to tell these stories. That's why both of your podcasts exist, because if we're not getting this message out there to the masses, then who is going to get it out there?
Exactly. And actually, that's a great kind of leap into us talking about it. So what does it mean to be Black?
Troy, it's all you.
I was going to defer, but okay. All right. I will clumsily make my way through so you can come through and sound more eloquent and
I can't. Goodbye. We'll tag team it.
And better read than I. Let's see. How would I define Blackness as culture? Blackness is one thing I remember, and I remember doing this in college. Someone told me about the cultural iceberg. Now, if you Google cultural iceberg, it's basically the stuff that's above the surface culture and deep culture, right? So they say, Black people don't have culture. African Americans don't have culture. And the whole thing about the cultural iceberg is the fact that there are things that are on the surface, that are above the surface. Music, how you talk, what you dress like, that kind of thing. But underneath it was called deep culture. And it's the stuff that doesn't get a whole lot of play. It's going to be, how do you culturally deal with old people? How do you culturally talk about family? How do you engage with religion? What are your kind of ticks? What are your kind of cultural touchstones for things about how you feel about things? How you feel about being in the world and being part of a bigger whole. And one of the things about being Black, and, I can say, I do some of the surface stuff, right? I can speak African American vernacular. I listen to hip hop and jazz and R&B. I have a closet full of fashion mistakes, baggy jeans and, my cross colors and my African American College Alliance sweatshirts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I have that, but I also grew up in a household, in a culture, in a environment where being Black meant to have these touchstones, to have these things of, well, not only are you appearing this way, because obviously Black is appearance. Right. Well, part of being Black is appearance, but also having these cultural touchstones, having these cultural things that I share with a bunch of other people who live in the place where I live, and who, when I go outside the place where I live, where I can find that root, find those places I can reach out from. I can say, I am Black in these ways, and to look at the differences. Like if I'm in Paris, if I'm traveling internationally, I'm at the airport, I can see how Black influences those spaces and influences how people react to me in those spaces and how I react to other people in those spaces. What does it mean to be Black? It means to be, at this point, pretty much the only group universally persecuted, universally revel. There is a word for the N-word in every language. You are to know that the world is mostly against you, that the world's language centers around keeping you subhuman. That's not, Toni Morrison said, racism exists to distract. Racism exists to knock you off your square. You grind and you doing your thing, and racism exists to throw you off. And did she really say that? Are they following me around because I'm Black, or because it's a way of messing with your head? But obviously it's the beauty of it. It is it's the culture. I can look at anybody Black on the street and give them a head up, and they know exactly what that is. Right, I can look. There's that camaraderie, that kind of automatic camaraderie, and we'll go back. We'll come to the all skin folk ain't kin folk. We'll get to that, but it is not a limiting thing. It is a limitless status. It's a limitless way of being, but it is also tempered by the fact that worldwide, and for many years of our greats and all that, where we have not been treated as human and our persistence in spite of.
Snaps.
Okay.
That's so good.
Right. I've got I have so many notes. And I think that something that you touched on was really important. The idea of what we tell ourselves about being Black versus what we receive from the outside world in reaction to our Blackness. So I think that's a really important point. I love the idea that it's limitless and not limited. Boy, that's a shirt. That's a shirt. All right, Jessica, my dear.
Besides the fact that Troy killed that answer. Okay, I'm making way. I really loved how he touched on just how obviously we occupy space in the world because, you know, for undergrad, I went to this really small white liberal arts college in upstate New York called Hamilton College. And like, it is 3% Black and there are 1,800 students. So there were 54 Black people on this campus, right? And I think that so much of this like conversation, especially sometimes when people want to be quote unquote elevated or in these like educational circles, they want to point to the fact that, you know, race is just a social construct. And although that may be true, my lived experiences due to this social construct are things that cannot be argued with, you know? So
right.
That whole notion of are people following me around the store, you know, as a woman who is Black, am I going to be viewed as quote unquote too aggressive? And especially being like a dark skinned woman, am I going to be presented as quote unquote, you know, are people going to view me as masculine? Like there are so many ways where how the world views Blackness is different from, you know, how I define it. And I define Blackness as beauty. I define it as strength, resilience. Like the world is so rooted in a culture of anti-Blackness. And just like how Troy said, where in every culture in the world, there are so many ways where being dark is the worst thing that you could possibly be in this whole, like on this planet. And knowing that everything is against you, but still waking up every day, doing the damn thing, whether it's like not even to like quote lyrics, but it's just like, you know, raise the children, then get back to business. But like there are so many ways where we have to overcome every single barrier that's been in our way, whether it's, you know, physically stealing people from their homeland so that whatever, you know, culture or ethnic background they would have been from, you know, they have to be somewhere else. Cool. Black people, what do? We create our own culture. And then what does that culture become? That becomes the dominant culture. And it's not until that something is quote unquote Black that it's cool. And then eventually it becomes mainstream. But after it's been, you know, watered down and removed from its cultural origin. So, you know, Black people, we are the culture carriers. We are strong. We are bold. We are beautiful. And not even just because I feel like sometimes when Blackness is discussed, it's always within this notion of like strength and, you know, I hate slavery and how far we've come. But also there is, you know, there's softness, it's duality. Blackness is duality. It's being able to, you know, be as delicate as a flower, but also having like the strength of an ox. And being Black is the best thing, period.
I can't even. I mean, this is a whole book right here.
It is.
And I wanted to go back to something that Troy mentioned that I think you also mentioned too, Jessica. The idea of Blackness informing how you move in the world. So take people through your mindset as a Black person in everyday life. What are the thoughts that you have as you move through the world that honestly no other group of people would have? And for example, I think about my hair, right? Because I wear my hair naturally. And when I was working and meeting a new client, I would go through this whole exercise in my head. Like, should I pull it back? Should I be in San Francisco, or am I going to be in the Midwest somewhere? And so also in the back of my mind is knowing the studies that when people see Black women with natural hair, they automatically assume that we're not as competent and the respect level goes down, right? Mm-hmm. And what was really silly was my picture on LinkedIn was of my natural hair. So people had seen me anyway, but here I was stressed out about how to wear my hair. Mm-hmm. So for you guys, how does being Black affect how you just kind of navigate everyday life?
The interesting thing is that I think, there's a desire to think that, if one lives like in a large, urban or metropolitan city, then these issues don't necessarily exist. And it's not true at all. So like here in Miami, where Black people, there's so many people of color, where oftentimes there's like that mentality of like everyone's a minority, so no one is a minority. But that's not true, because there is still a pigmentocracy here. There's still various ways in which people have like categorized themselves as in terms of like who's above in these like self-made social structures, who's at the bottom. And whenever, obviously in the midst of like COVID, like I'm natural. My hair is, faded, like very short, because I have alopecia. So it's like all of these things inform how I take up space, where it's almost a mix of me thinking in terms of both how like gender and race, and how there's almost like a performativity at play, where I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that, and this speaks to just the insidious nature of how Blackness has been policed and like criminalized, where I'm like, okay, I don't want to wear something that is baggy, so that if someone thinks that I'm a Black man, that they would, if they felt quote unquote in fear of their life, that they could call the police would mess me up. And they obviously do these things to Black women too, but it's just such a very specific way, where whenever I'm like taking up space, I'm very aware, like, okay, where am I going to go within Miami? Who are the vast majority of people here? Like, what does language look like within this particular space? Because like, obviously in terms of Blackness, there's even internalized racism within our own community. And growing up here, because there are so many, like, people are Trinidadian, people are Jamaican, people are Bahamian, people are Haitian, I think there's a desire to segment ourselves off that way. And it wasn't until I went to school in upstate New York where I was just like, Jessica, you black. I get that, your parents and your grandma speak another language, different languages, but racially, no one is going to look at me and be like, yes, but this is a different one. This is Jessica. So I think that was like where my like racial reckoning came from initially, but also just like how I move around here. I'm very aware of my Blackness, especially in terms of like Miami circles.
So Troy, actually on that front, do you make decisions before you even leave your home every day that are based on you being a Black man?
Oh, totally. I don't have that intersection of gender and race. But to be 6'6", 210 pounds, and noticeable in a crowd is definitely a thing. That's when I get my code switch together. That's when I try to move as slowly as possible. I'm getting to work, on a bus full of Black people. I step on campus and I have to change. The University of Chicago has the largest private security force this side of Israel. So they out here. And so I have to be cognizant of, what I'm wearing, where I am on campus. Am I looking like I'm going somewhere? Do I have my bag on me? Do I have my, my ID, my university ID prominently displayed? No, that's totally real. But it gets to the point though, and this is, I guess, I don't think about, my white coworkers doing it because they don't have to.
Right.
I don't think about at these points, there are certain things, certain times I know and I've internalized, and it's a tax. It's a invisible thing that I have to deal with. Invisible back of the mind, like, hey, you wearing the jersey and the Cortez, but are you smiling and grinning? Which is one of the things that's really taken back on this pandemic thing. You can't see me smiling, nice white people. You can't see me smiling. I'm smiling, I swear. I'm smiling at you, and how you doing? And like, I'm trying to communicate with my eyes, right? And I'm trying to, keep you at ease, because, you can run over to the little call box and say, the Negro is bothering me, and I got 20 cats on me now. Like,
Right.
I'm sorry. Like, I was trying to be helpful. I was trying to be nice. I was trying to be, but like I do recognize, there is that bit of privilege, and privilege is one of those words now that's been thrown around quite a bit. And I do realize I have that privilege, I guess, in terms of I don't have to fear, for the most part, I don't have to fear sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to fear gendered violence where somebody looks at me and goes, you know what, I'm gonna mess with you, all the way to wherever you're going. I understand that. And, we're thinking about, like these taxes, these things of we realize, and that's part of culture, is you realize that you cannot go out in the dominant culture and you can be authentically you. And then we have to talk about what authentically you is. Authentically you is more than, do I just keep my hair natural today? Do I put the barrettes in? Do I, tie it up, put it in the, ponytail? Do I ponytail it? What do I do? We have to do that, as a people. We have to do that because part of the thing about being a minority is knowing what the majority is doing and thinking and thought processes, and also trying to move through those spaces with as less friction as possible.
Right. And that, I think, really interesting, the idea that part of how we move is because we don't want to cause trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that being Black means that people think that you're going to cause trouble is an additional stressor, right? There's nothing, there's no neutrality as it relates to being Black. Like, people have a definite feeling about it. And you brought up a word that is interesting to me. So how do we feel, or do y'all feel, about the word minority as it relates to Black people?
I hate it. I can't remember what quote I heard it from, but all of these things are obviously rooted in to the point where people end up believing it. So if one feels like they are a minority, then what does that connote? Oh, I am lesser. My values and my opinions don't matter as much. I should shrink myself. And maybe that's kind of like going from 0 to 100. But I think that enough times by enough people, then that's something that we very much can internalize. And something that I liked that Troy said, and I was trying to think like, when I think of being a Black woman and taking up space in certain places, like if I'm in an Uber in pre-Rona world, like the concept of like, how do people, view Black women, and all of these things rooted in what oftentimes the dominant culture says. So it's rooted in these very gross, terrible stereotypes. So I'm going to be loud, I'm going to be rude, I'm going to be, X, Y, or Z. So it is this performance tax of mine where it's this performativity of like positiveness and the Queen's English, and not to the degree of like, no sir, yes ma'am, but it's that smiling, it's that extra effort of appearing non-threatening just so that other people can feel comfortable. And it's like, it's so exhausting. And like when I'm like quarantining with my family in Miami, but even living in New York, like that's something that I'm like especially aware of. Like my job is in Times Square. So, walking outside and there's like all of these different tourists and there's like police literally everywhere, of course, but just like trying to make sure it's like, like my chin is held high, my shoulders are back, like trying to, look, quote, it's like performing I'm going to work versus I'm going to work. And until I'm in a space where the majority of the people are Black, it's something that like, I feel like, oh no, I'm doing it like just because it's the instinct to survive, to make my path of least resistance is me acting a particular way. And it's exerting way more energy than someone who is non-Black probably is, all things constant except race.
I love the idea of it being a performance, because it really is. And when I was listening to Troy talk about the mask and what he has to do to kind of compensate for that, I was thinking, well, it's like, do you need a mask that says friendly black guy under here? Is that part of the performance? Like, you have a mask and makeup and the uniform, and you have to do something for the audience that's not authentic to you. You're acting, you're not being yourself.
I mean, that's where I think the existence of Black spaces of people who look like you, think like you, share the same cultural touchstones that you do is more important. But, at some point there are physical spaces, there are places like the Root, all these shout out, all these spots where people congregate, and like, I don't have to have the mask. I can speak the slang. You understand when I say ain't. Mm-hmm. At work, when like I said, I'm going to work, there are few Black people who I trust. We can chop it up, and I can let down that mask that I wouldn't normally let down until I got home. Until I got home, I started talking to my fellas, or talking to my wife, or something like that, where it was to the point of, you know what? The performative stuff, it's still me. Like, I'm still doing it. And there's still ways you can do it and be authentic.
The overall kind of thing is that we, as Black people, we have to navigate in multiple worlds. Right? Like, when I look at white people now and they're like, I just don't understand. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, we understand us and we understand you, because we've been in your world. You've never been in ours. And so I think I feel like it's kind of a superpower and an extra soft skill to have, to be able to navigate those two things. And I try not to look at it as a burden, but an opportunity to just develop that skill. Right. So the stuff we've talked about, it's like the challenges, but I want to know, what do you love the most about being Black? It might be a long list, but let's just have it.
I think Blackness is just so lively, like, whether it's, and this is across the diaspora, which goes to show, the diversity within one group of people. But I love, the foods that we have, the way that we cook, the love that we put behind these things, like, I feel like everything has such intentionality. And maybe, and I don't know, maybe my Hotep hat is on, but like, maybe. Oh no. Rooted, just like, I feel like so much of what we do has like a double entendre, a double meaning. Parents, for instance, like, if people weren't able to provide financially with always, the latest sneakers or this sort of thing, like, the love that they would put is in the food that they have, just like the music that we have, the way that we're so passionate. And it's not to say that, like, all Black people can dance, because, like, obviously that's like a massive stereotype, but just like the freedom that we have, where was I can't remember where I was walking, but Candy came on. And when I tell you that that's one of my favorite songs ever, where I feel like I want to just like bust down the electric slide. And I, internally was kind of looking to see, like, are there any Black people near me? So that I can, like, like Troy said, exchange that glance where I'm like, I'm not going to be like, that tastes like candy. But like internally, like, right, but like we know those things.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's being able to champion one another. Like, I'm not a big superhero person, but like, did I watch Black Panther? Many a time. Like,
with a new outfit.
Listen, it's like we do what we have to, and then some. Like, this collective identity and the way that we celebrate and champion one another is, I would say, my favorite part of being Black. Because I don't know, I think we've known that the world doesn't have us. So it's like, we've always had to have ourselves, and like, we got us. And I think that's what I love most about being Black.
Rooting for everybody Black.
Yes, really though.
Although, well, so I answer the question, and then we're going to get to skin folk. All skin folk ain't kin folk.
Real.
Because I enjoy, and like the camaraderie, knowing that somebody else gets it, right? Like, if I say, like, my sister and I have a thing, like, I'll say like a song lyric, she'll say the other song lyric, we'll sing it, and it's a thing. Like we can kind of piggyback on each other. I can talk to my fellas and like, yo, this thing is happening. Like, oh, that's some BS. Or, yo, what are y'all doing about that? Like it is us, right? It's us. And I'd say it's us against the world necessarily, but it's definitely us against people who don't have our best interests at heart.
Yes.
And but on the converse, because you're rooting for everybody Black, because you're uplifting other people. Like, I don't even know you, but I know you want a thing. Go on with yourself. Like, I'm gonna leave a little comment. I don't even know you. Go on, girl. Do that thing. Here's a random animated GIF of yes. Like, fine, let's do that. That's cool. But that's what makes it hurt even more when you find out somebody who looks like you, someone with that same cultural touchstone, does not have your back at all.
Heartbreak.
For whatever reason, right? So whether it's monetary, like you looking at like, okay, so I say and we talked about back in the day it was Sellout, Oreo, all that good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And because the diaspora is so large, right? Because we have Afro-Latinos, because we have folks of mixed parentage and the further, and obviously colorism going from, light, bright and dark and all that kind of stuff and what those things mean. When we're dealing with people who look like us, who do not have our best in mind and are doing so on a level where they get the benefit and no one else does, right? Because part of the Black culture is a collective.
Sure.
All we got from slavery, from the tobacco plantations, sugar cane down in the Caribbean. It was all about what we can do for each other. It takes a village, and to kind of keep the culture going, and kind of the exercise becomes what can we do? And so there's always going to be outliers, right? There's people Harriet would have saved, people Harriet would have shot. So what do we do?
Can't save everybody.
You can't save everybody because everybody don't want to be saved.
Right. Oof.
So what do you do with the people who are saved? And then they get looked at as, well, I don't know what y'all have a problem with because this one right here says everything is good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So that just makes it more, because, and that's what makes this stuff more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
All this stuff more interesting is the fact that we are not a monolith.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything we do, we touch on. Everything we touch is changed for so much better. Tiger showed up. Golf was white as hell. Tiger showed up. Oh, snap. Black people on the links. Let's get it. So, one of the things in preparation, you said, what is, have you ever been talking about things not being Black? What is not Black? And so the thing is, though, is that I watch hockey. I've been a hockey fan since I was like 7 or 8.
But Troy, Black people don't watch hockey.
They listen to it after the Laker games on KLAC 570 AM. On those times the Lakers weren't playing, they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna just listen to this," and then you fall in love with the sport. But there are Black people in hockey. There were Black people in hockey back in the 80s and 90s, and loved them to death. But they were like, "Wait a minute, there are Black people in hockey. Then there are Black people in golf, Black people in tennis." We irrevocably change things by our existence, by our success. And the only thing that bothers me, and this is a total tangent, the only thing that bothers me is the fact that nobody Black gets the room to be mediocre. You don't get to be average. You don't get to be average. I would love to be average as hell, making $50,000, average house, doing my thing, and not have to uplift, a collective. But collective is what we're talking about. Collective is what we were born with. Collective is what we have the call back to, because you stand on the shoulders of giants, and to whom much is given, much is expected. So we're doing all this, right? We're working all this. We don't get a chance to be average. We can't be average.
You can be average if you're speaking against Black people, though. People like Candace Owens and Terrence Williams are super average.
And thank God for it, because if they were actually good at it, we'd have a problem.
Correct.
So sorry, that was a thing.
No. I want, as always, my goal in my private conversations and also here in this conversation is that I want people to be unfiltered. This is not an area, this is a safe space, right? An area where you can speak your mind as if you was talking to the fellas or if me and you were on the phone catching up. So your thoughts are important because, like you said, we're not a monolith. So my favorite thing about being Black is, even though it's not universal, is having rhythm. Because I look at people, I'm like, how do you not hear the beat? Like, how do you not hear that? So I want to wrap it up. I thank you guys for your time. I have one more question. Who is your Black hero? And why is it not Terry Crews?
Yo. I'm gonna let Jessica riff. I'm gonna let Jessica riff some because I've been yapping. But
well, thank you, Troy. I think you saying how Blackness, like, it's all the, like, we are revolutionary, we are all of these things, but it's like you can't be mediocre. And when I thought of just like so many Black women of like who do I love so much? And obviously it's going to be my girl, Michelle Obama. And it obviously speaks to her grace under pressure. Like, she was that duality, like how I mentioned before. She's strength, but she's grace. Her arms are fantastic. Her book was amazing. She raised 2 young women in a house that was built by slaves. Her presence is what made me feel like, and I remember this was like junior year of high school, where I was like, who's this man who wants to run for president? And I low-key like held my breath because I was just like, oh, let's see his wife. And I was like, yes.
And,
right.
That's a real thing.
Isn't it though? And
it's a real
like,
thing.
She's so smart how she could truly live her life in obscurity. She's still speaking out about injustices. She's talking about how our lives matter. She is still using a very active platform to tell our stories, to tell her own personal story. And I think oftentimes, I think that she is so uncompromising. I think that she's so smart. The gravitas that this woman has, like, if I ever had the chance to interview her, like, I would probably have a panic attack, but I think that she is incredible. I think that she's I don't want to be like she's my all in all because she's not Jesus, but like, but she is someone who, like, when I think of like Black excellence, and I know that not everyone loves that phrase, but to me, Michelle Obama is Black excellence.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better.
My hero probably would be Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde wrote some things that changed my entire outlook about being a man, about being a Black man specifically, about the inherent, I think you guys touched on before, the inherent softness and the inherent determination of Black women. Mm-hmm. I have the utmost reverence for those of us who use the written word and can reach minds. And Audre Lorde and James Baldwin, 2 of my literary heroes, and to be able to write eloquently and simply. I've been in academia for a long time, and I'm quite aware of using big words for no reason, and how that does not appeal to the people, right? Like, it's constant for me to go back to their words, to use, to go forward, to move forward, there's nothing new under the sun.
Right.
How did y'all deal with this? What was y'all mindset? What was your, Toni Morrison? Like, we have an absolute wealth of intellect and of creativity and all. And I don't have to fear telling my stories is going to alienate middle America. I don't have to say, well, but how was it played in Des Moines? When our humanity is absolutely human. We feel the same thing. We do the same, we can be petty. We can be lustful. We can be calculating. We can be high-minded. We can be human. I'm a fan of all those. But like I said, James Baldwin, Audre Lorde are my two heroes. So that's yeah. Damn, I've been talking a lot. My bad.
You got a lot to say. I mean, I think it's the perfect wrap up because at times when we try to explain something as complicated, complex, beautiful as being Black, to have kind of a someone to look at, to examine their life and see how they exist in the world, I think is a good kind of a touch point. So I thank you, the two of you, for being honest and open. You're welcome back in the Black Seat at any time.
Love it.
With all of my melanin, I want to sincerely thank my guests, Troy and Jessica, and thank you for taking the time to listen with an open heart and mind. Special shout out to Ketsa for the music, and we've got lots of other great episodes planned. I look forward to introducing you to some really interesting Black folks. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me at superblack@intheblackseat.com. We're also on Twitter or IG @intheblackseat. God bless y'all and see you again soon.